One of the most exciting things about collecting video games for the Atari 2600 is that there was very little standardization in how the cartridges were actually designed. So each of these looks completely different, yet they all play on the Atari 2600. And let's take a look at all the different kind of styles that these companies created for their video games to make them stand out. Here's an example of some Atari 2600 games manufactured by Atari, and these are some really old ones. This one's copyright 1979, text label cartridges. You can see they have textured plastic shells on the back. They're pretty smooth cartridges on the most part. They have the plastic top here. They started putting pictures onto these things. Here we have Brain Games, keeping with the same kind of style though. Smooth line there, textured background. Title on the back of the cartridge. These are pretty standard. Combat, most people are familiar with this game. Label there and textured plastic shell around the outside. Let's take a look at some Parker Brothers games. You can see G.I. Joe here and Q Bert are very similar, and they have little ridges on the side and a slightly pointy end there, which is different than you'd find on the standard Atari produced cartridge. These days, all video games for the PS3 and Xbox 360 look identical, but obviously not back in the Atari days, which is why these are so much fun to collect. And look, it says Parker Brothers. Get focus on that. I think this is pretty neat. Made it easier to grip and pull out. After years of use, there's some wear and tear here on Cosmic Arc, Imagic. Very, very standout, unique cartridge design that has a little shelf here. You see, take Atlantis. And occasionally, as we see down here in Dragonfire, they put images on them as well. Let's look at the side of this thing. They give you a little grip spot there, so you could grip it from the top, you could grab it on the side, and then the plastic inside that you'd see with Combat, for instance. It's very different there. See, this one's covered and this one isn't. I like Imagic's cartridge design. These really stand out. And a nice textured surface. Very cool. Now this one's interesting. Not only is it white, but it says Coleco on the back. And that's Zaxxon by Sega. If you look on the bottom here, it says Package, Program, and Audio Visual, copyright 1982, Coleco. And over here we have another game that on the back says Coleco, but this is Donkey Kong by Nintendo. So I guess that looks like Coleco was actually manufacturing these games, bringing them over from the other developers. And take a look at the side of the cartridges. They give you a nice grippy thing on the side to pull it out of the machine. And these Coleco games also stand out from amongst the crowd because they're white plastic. My least favorite Atari cartridge design is this. I don't know what you'd call this exactly, but the feel of it is cheap. They're lighter than the average Atari cartridge. They don't even have pictures on them. These must have been incredibly inexpensive to produce, and yet they actually do fit into the Atari very easily. See, they're just exposed, wide open. There are a whole lot of different games. Some of them are great, some of them are awful. That came in this particular cartridge design. Yeah. Tapper appears to be by Bally Midway, and it has these little ridges in here to make it easy to pull out. Interestingly, this particular game is packaged and programmed copyright 1984 Sega Enterprises. Now on this cartridge, Sega was apparently working with Coleco, but here Bally Midway is working with Sega. If only these cartridges could talk. The kings of programming Atari 2600 video games, Activision, have my favorite cartridge design of all, because you can take these and move them around and they're not going to slip out of your hand, because Activision was smart enough to give you a little plastic thing here that locked the games into place. So you can see here that this would actually fit into the top here on River Raid. They'd literally lock into place and they wouldn't slide around. Something the Odyssey 2 tried to do with their games. And Activision one-upped them because they can't slide around that way or this way. These are really tremendous and they stack very easily on your shelves. Now the actual artwork on the front of Activision games is not my favorite. They always tended to put these kind of boring little images on there, and names like Boxing and Stampede. We can look here at how Space Cavern shouts at you to be used with, in capital letters, joystick controller, just in case you missed it. And Apollo created these games, and you can see on the back here that it says Apollo, Games by Apollo. Check that out. See, everybody was doing something just a little bit differently, which I like. I think that's pretty neat. Wish they'd do that today. Maybe somebody would produce octagonal PlayStation 3 games. US games used a cartridge design that looked like this and had little grippy things over here, and then there were slots over here for some reason. Towering Inferno. Full color silver label Mario Brothers for the Atari 2600. Here's something really interesting. CBS Electronics produced Tunnel Runner. We get a gray Atari 2600 case with ridges. Note it has the little locking things that Activision used. And if we look at Skateboarding, it also has the little locking things and a different style of ridges. So these games would actually lock into each other, just like the Activision games, except they were slightly different cartridge designs. Very, very interesting. I don't know what it means. Perhaps it holds the secret of the universe somewhere between Skateboarding and Tunnel Runner. You'd find cartridge label variations from Atari all the time, as we see here in Combat and Combat. Is the game any better because it has a picture of Combat? Not necessarily. You should own two of them in case you want to play it more than once. All of these great Atari 2600 cartridges, all different, all getting along, all for the Atari 2600. You should collect them all. The only thing missing in this stack of video games is an Atari version of Thexter. Maybe they didn't realize it at the time, but Atari really stands for diversity. You know that when Tunnel Runner, Brain Games, and Robot Tank can all get along, you know that there's hope for the future.